Martin Robinson.
Hello.
Martin, you were telling you're off to Kraftwerk today.
I'm going to see Kraftwerk later. Look, what are we talking about today, David?
We're talking about the Milburn review, Alan Milburn's interim review into NEETs, into young people who are not in education, employment or training.
That's correct. And also what it means for schools. Bearing in mind it's an interim report and it's not telling us what to do in schools, but it's certainly making some comments about the sorts of things that schools should be perhaps thinking about.
Yeah, maybe sort of highlighting some of the things which more broadly we're getting wrong in the UK. So we've got some interesting facts and figures to have a bit of a poke around.
We have indeed. And shall we, let's say how many people in the UK between the age of 16 and 24 are NEET? It's nearly 1 million. Nearly
1 million. And that's
people.
about 1 in 8. So that's not 1 million people from the population of around 60 million. That's 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds, isn't it?
Yeah. And if that were a city, it would be the third largest city in the country, apparently.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Bigger than Leeds and bigger than things. That's according to the report. I'm taking it out of the report,
A city of unemployed young people.
Yeah. So it's a big problem. And it's not a problem that's getting any better. In the last 25 years, it's only once gone below 10% of the population.
What does that mean, to only once go below 10% of the population?
It was probably 8% or something like that, I would have thought. What do you mean?
Okay. All right. So basically, are we saying that in the last 25 years, it's the proportion of young people hasn't fallen below 10%? Or has always been above 10%?
For the last 25 years, it's basically been a big problem. The trouble with the big problem of the last 25 years is it's noticeably got worse recently. And that's something else that we need to look at. 6 in 10 NEETs have never had a job.
60% not working and not looking for work. So how does that work? If you're not looking for work, does that disqualify you from getting benefits?
Well, there's other forms of benefits now as well, isn't there? I think so you can get benefits that some people are saying that elements of their welfare system are encouraging worklessness, if you like, though the majority of people who receive benefits are actually in work, but that's another matter altogether. But certainly if we're getting to a point where young people, there's a distinct number of young people who have left school, and some of whom have left school, bear in mind, before the age of 16 for a various number of reasons, who have never been in work and never look likely to be in work.
So
this review goes into that.
45% of 24-year-old NEETs never had a job, Martin.
Yeah.
That's almost half of 24-year-olds who are... So basically, if you start... What does that mean? If you start off NEET, the likelihood of getting a job later on declines. Is that what we think?
Yeah, and there's a lot of correlation with where you live as well. And obviously, areas of deprivation, unsurprisingly, have the highest number of NEETs. I think, for instance, Middlesbrough is one of the cities with one of the highest number of NEETs. Also, seaside towns don't come out very well. And seaside towns have a particular thing, but of course, with jobs are there for the short summers that we have in this country, and not necessarily for the rest of time. Also, there's a big correlation that people who arrive at nursery school or early years,
they're not ready to learn,
so they're
they can't speak well,
they're not toilet trained,
like
etc., etc. Children at that age, there's a correlation between them and them being NEET when they
Yeah, they're
in
3
school.
times more likely,
Yeah,
aren't they, to end up being neat later on in life if they're not school ready
yeah, school
at
ready,
age
that's the
4 to
term.
5.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
exactly
there's
that. And
lots and lots
it's
of
not just a
issues.
cost to the young people themselves, it's a big cost to the country.
Yeah, because
Uh,
you're obviously having to look after these people in some way,
in some form.
in
Yeah,
financially, but also there's a likely correlation, I expect, though I can't tell you this definitely, but with activities that might be thought of as antisocial, whether it be criminal
wow.
activity or something.
Okay.
And there's certainly be use of mental health services and various other health services. And there's something like, and I can't remember what I got this, it was in the Milburn review. There are places in the country where the average age, now this is,
Mm.
there's an age called healthy age. So there are areas where high levels of deprivation and high levels of NEETs, where the healthy age expectancy is 51.
Wow.
So you get to the age of 51, and from that point onwards, you are debilitated in some way. And that's the average. So some are lower than that,
Right,
and
right, of
some are higher
course,
than
yeah.
that. Yeah.
So yeah, and there's other correlations, aren't there? Those people, those young people who are not in education, employment, or training, because of work-related health conditions, has gone up by 70% in the last
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
So that's is that self-reported, or do we know if where the data comes from on that?
Right. I mean, if you go through, and I'll put a link to the actual review here. It's
Because
extremely,
it's a big beast, isn't it? There's a lot
it's
of it.
it's for an interim review. It's very detailed, and there are
Yeah.
huge amounts of details as to where the information comes from. There is some self-reporting in it, but there's a hell of a
Mm.
lot of factual
Mm.
stuff going on there
Yeah.
as well. And like we say, a lot of it could be correlation rather than causation, but there's the causes, I think, are well known for a lot of reasons. The big question is, and if you get to chapter 4, and it's 9 chapters altogether,
Yeah.
chapter 4, education and skills, that's the section that really interests us, obviously. And he calls it the faltering foundation.
Mm.
So we have this idea that education and skills, and bear in mind it's education and skills we're talking about here. So there's something
Yeah.
perhaps people want to discuss. But what is the relationship between the world of work and the world of education? And how much is it school's job to get children into the
Right.
world of work? And one of the ways is the GCSE. That's the classic way, I suppose, that schools have, because it's also the classic way that employers perhaps look at a child's eligibility to work. And there is a correlation between children who get under fewer than 5 GCSEs, and we're talking grade 4 or above
Yeah.
GCSEs and NEETs. So there is a
Yeah.
correlation there. But again, we can't say that that would be causation, because there could be reasons why they don't get the GCSEs to that level, which might be feeding into why they're not ready for the world of work and not able to get work. There's
And it's
also,
worth saying
so go on.
there's a sort of general perception that, young people these days are just a bit feckless and they can't be bothered to do jobs. But of those surveyed in the report, 84% said they really wanted to find a job or get into education and training. That there might be a small number of people who are completely apathetic, but it's not the norm.
Yeah.
And the other thing to
There's
say is, it looks like it's getting worse, not better.
it's
So
getting worse, and there's also things that obviously with employers, that there's been recent increases in national insurance contributions from employers, but employers do not have to pay national insurance on employing someone under the age of 21. So at
right,
the younger end of that, that there should be nothing stopping employers taking somebody on. But there's this catch 22, whereas if you've got nothing on your CV from an employer,
yeah,
you find it difficult to get into a work placement with someone if you're against someone who's got some sort of
You're right. And one of
CV.
the suggestions in the review is about work experience, isn't it?
Yeah.
So
And
we can
do you
talk a bit
remember
more
work
about that
experience?
as we
Most
go.
schools do something like 1 or 2 weeks of work experience for year 10s,
Yeah,
11s, or even 12s in some cases, and that's about it.
I don't think anyone does 2 weeks these days.
Yeah.
It's got less and less. I think it'd be interesting to know
Yeah.
whether that what other people's experience is. So anyway, when it comes to Scott, there's a lot in there about as we've hinted at about health and welfare reform and all sorts. But we're interested in the education bits, and
Hmm.
the TES reporting on this said the school system fails to prepare pupils for work. So it's our fault, isn't it, Martin?
Well, I think if we're the major place that young people are associated with outside of family, I mean, I think family and obviously all the things that come with background, etc., etc. I think schools are probably pretty high up the list
Mm.
as to whether people are going to be successful or not in the world of work. So I think schools do have a responsibility, certainly.
Right. So you just talked about the correlation between GCSE outcomes and unemployment. Does this suggest, or does this add fuel to the argument that GCSEs need urgent reform?
That's a long pause there. I mean,
It
it's
was.
it's a difficult one to say definitely. I mean, if you say
Mm,
that one of the reasons that because I think we talked about this and we keep coming back
we
to
have.
it, that there's a long tail of underachievement, and if you have people who will forever fail, and I use that term advisedly because we're talking about those who get under a pass, a so-called pass at 4, even though we all look
Yeah,
one
yeah,
to
yeah.
three is a pass or whatever. But anyway, that
Technically.
technically that the GCSEs aren't serving the needs of certain elements of our society,
Mm,
and certain people who for whatever reason struggle at school. If we're reducing qualifications to just GCSEs, then I think it does get problematic. I think there's also this idea, certainly amongst pupils, is that for experience in lots of schools is that schools are preparing them for university more than
right.
anything else, and that's
Yeah.
the entire focus of the whole academic churn, if you like, of which up to just under 50% of people go to university now. When I was at school it was 7%, so there's a big increase, but that's still the majority of people who go to school don't go to university yet. For
And a
certain schools,
significant number of NEETs actually have degrees.
yeah, yeah,
So there's also, I think, the concern, we've probably talked about this ourselves, about the fact that not all degree qualifications are equal.
mm,
That some young people are being funneled into courses which maybe are not particularly useful and saddle them with a lot of debt and don't result in qualifications that are widely considered to be worthwhile by employers,
mm.
perhaps.
Well, employers they think the biggest reason that uh, they perceive the biggest reason for young people not coming into employment is the lack of motivation of the young person
Mm,
and previous work experience. So there's
right.
that catch-22, because you're also, if you send off CV and it comes back each time, and sometimes you send things off and it's, in the vast majority of cases there's no reply from the employer at
Yeah.
all, you can
Yeah.
see what happens to motivation there.
Yeah, of course.
There's also lack of soft skills is something that employers mention, and 42% of employers think it's the main the challenge they have when hiring young people is their lack of soft skills or work readiness. So that's one when they're
Mm.
taking them on. So
What do they mean by that, do you think?
they're not, Well, like we're saying about school readiness at the age,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously here
So
we're hoping
obviously
they're
it's
out of
not
their nappies,
obviously
but
they're potty trained,
yeah,
yeah. But
but they might actually not ask where the toilets are or things like that.
right,
There might
okay.
be I don't know, but I think the thing is how you get on with your fellow
I mean, it's
workforce, how you fit into the
maybe.
team, how do you come across in terms of being able to engage with customers, perhaps, and these sorts of things, speaking
So
well.
little things like being able to make eye contact with the people that you're talking
Yeah,
to,
and now we're
and
straight into the ASD challenges
well
as well.
that, but also the oracy agenda, and there's a keenness in the government that be pursued with some robustness, and that young people need to do more talking and speaking in
Yeah.
different
Didn't we
contexts.
used to call this the 5 C's or something? Communication, collaboration, all that sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
the
You know,
21st century skills, Martin.
that's the ones, yes. Um,
21st century
which
skills, yeah.
actually 20th century skills as well, by the way. You used to have to be able to communicate in the old days as well.
Well, you used to have to do all of those things right back to the Stone Age. I always think they're much better thought of as Stone Age skills. We've always needed to be creative and collaborative, or if you want to hunt a mammoth, pretty tricky to do it by yourself, Martin. You need to be
Well,
communicating and working in a group.
I'm not quite that old, but
Well, he
I had a
says
go.
that,
I had a go back in the
but
day.
and so those are the things that employers are saying. They're shifting the blame onto young people and saying they're not work ready. That may or may not be true, and that lack of work readiness may or may not be something that can be laid at the door of schools. But how much does AI have to do with this? There's a general perception that low tier roles are no longer being offered. That sort of work has been farmed out to chatbots. And where are these? The young people, getting degrees, the milk round jobs that used to exist when people were graduating don't exist in the same numbers. And
There is there is that. I don't know if it's AI coming to the fore yet, but it's certainly on the horizon and leaking into certain areas already. But it's little things like being online to read. Where's the newspaper round gone? Little things like that. For so many people, the newspaper round was a kid's way into work, classically. But who goes
right,
on a newspaper round? You don't even get the milk going from door to door nowadays. So little jobs that were available for younger people back in the day, which were
right.
low skilled, but you needed to be getting up early. You needed to be there on time. You need to be able to deliver. So you need to be able to read. You need to be able to, go around a neighborhood, know where things go. Little things like that. Say hello to people on the way. So we're talking about pre-16 jobs. Those
Yeah.
sorts of things. The Saturday
Did you have a
job,
paper round,
classically.
Martin?
I didn't have a paper round, no.
Didn't you?
I
I
didn't.
did.
Yeah, there you go, you see. So
Yeah.
that's it. You see, that's why you're not neat.
Well, mine maybe. So there's been I just think the AI thing's sort of interesting because there's a sort of perception in business, especially in sort of technology, that this is a wholly good thing. But there's been a couple of, I thought, sort of quite interesting little anecdotes of various figures speaking at graduation ceremonies at US universities and getting booed off. So there was Gloria Caulfield was booed off at the University of Central Florida after calling AI the next industrial revolution. Anthony Seldon would have liked that, wouldn't he? And then at the University of Arizona, the former Google CEO Eric Schmidt was also got the similar treatment when he was said that AI was sort of disrupting employment in all sorts of exciting ways, and the audience weren't excited about that in the same way that he was, and you can kind of see why. It's there's a lot of anxiety
I think there's
about.
there's more anxiety than there is the fact of it getting involved. I mean, let's have a look at what's happening in the whole of Europe and
Yes,
seeing,
you've got a
and
lovely
if
graphic
we
to
if
show
we
us, haven't you?
compare this country, so we would expect AI, etc., etc., to be affecting all countries in a pretty similar
That's
way.
true.
So
That is true.
how are we doing? Let's have a look then.
Oh, quite well, I hope. Oh no, there we are, 27th. But that's 27th out of 28. So yeah, over the last 10 years, the UK has fallen from 14th. That's with a 11.1% of young people not in employment, education, and training, and now we're at 27th with, what is that, 12.8%.
12.8, yeah.
So
And
only Romania doing worse than us.
yeah, and if we compare that, and this is 16 to 24-year-olds, if we compare
Yes.
that to the
Although
Netherlands,
16, so as a 16-year-old, you have to be, education's still compulsory, isn't it?
uh,
Until 18.
yeah, but obviously some people aren't. And it's, for
Wow.
instance, some people drop out of education because they are pregnant. Have a
Right.
child, and then or a carer. There's, you're not all in, and this is, so it's not
Okay.
illegal to look after an elderly parent, or something like that, or someone who's sick, or to have a
Okay.
child or things like that. So you can't force someone take them away from their child to insist they stay on in school.
Well, you can before they're 16, can't you?
Yeah, before they're 16. But again, if someone who has a child and is not able to look after it under the age of 16,
Yes.
over the age of 16, I think they can.
Right.
Then that's a slight
Okay.
difference.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay. Well, let's not get into that. So, what are the success stories here?
Let's have a look. The Netherlands has gone on a huge trajectory at almost halving its level of NEETs from being 4.7 in 2015 to 2.9 in 2025, and all that time remaining number one country.
Top of the charts, yeah.
Yeah.
Do we know what they're doing?
Well, I don't know. That this is
because famously in the Netherlands they have very selective education. So from 11 you're selected into different tiers of schools. So the equivalent of a grammar school and the equivalent of a technical school.
Yeah.
And my reading of the research on that it's not very good for equality. It's not very good for equity.
Well, equity is one thing, but if you're a NEET, then it's not very equitable, is it? The other thing that has other country has a system a bit like that is Germany, and they've gone from second in 2015 with 6.2% NEET to 12th now with 8.2% NEET. So they're getting slightly worse. But these are bigger countries. Smaller countries, I think, can perhaps be more successful in this. If we look at the trajectory,
Ireland can hold their head up, can't they?
Well, the Irish can.
Yeah, and they're looks pretty good. That they've more than halved their NEET rate.
Yeah, and they've gone from 14.3% in 2015 at 21st in the list to 4th now at 6.4%. So a big change there. But again, we are talking about fewer people there, I should think.
Well, we are, but still, they're all each of those is an individual human being.
Yeah.
And what this is suggesting is that being a young person in the Netherlands or Ireland or Germany or practically anywhere else apart from Romania means that you've got a better chance of being in work or in some kind of educational training than you have here in Britain.
Yeah. So let's just go through a few the reasons. One of the things is that the report throws at schools is about teacher quality. And it talks about how the children who need most get the least. And that teacher quality is the single largest in-school determinant of pupil outcomes. A year with a good teacher can add months of progress. A year without one can set a child back by the same margin. For disadvantaged children, the cumulative effect over a school career is the difference between catching up and falling irretrievably behind. The young people who need the most high-quality sustained teaching are the least likely to receive it.
And that's in the UK, but not necessarily elsewhere, according to the report. Now, I've got a bit of an issue with that, as because that's true as far as it goes, and it's true that when we look at big numbers of teachers, we can see the effects of teaching, and we can see exactly what that report there is suggesting, that a year with a skilled teacher makes a huge difference, and especially when compared to one that's below average. The problem is we've got no way of identifying who these teachers are at the level of individuals. We can see them at the level of cohorts, but not anything more meaningfully than that. And I think that, there's very much an axiomatic idea that has been cemented into a lot of the dialogue around school improvement, which is, a school system can't improve beyond the quality of its teachers. And I think, my take on this is that looking at teachers is the wrong place to look. That teachers produce teaching, for want of a better word, amongst other things, and that the quality of teaching produced by an individual teacher can vary enormously, even over the course of a single day. My experience of a teacher is you can teach a great lesson period one and be absolutely ropey by the end of the day.
Okay.
And you're the same person. And the other bit that I think is routinely omitted from this debate is that I genuinely believe, and there's good data to support this, that there are schools which make it actively harder to be an effective teacher.
Right. And I think this is where we get into how they justify their comments here. So in places where NEET rates are the highest, schools struggle the hardest to recruit and retain teachers, good teachers. And the geography of teacher shortage maps onto the geography of youth detachment. And also, secondary schools in the least deprived areas were 3 times more likely than schools in the most deprived areas to be rated as outstanding by Ofsted. So, and Ofsted is one of the ways they are sort of suggesting this happens. So they're looking here at cohorts of children in areas where there are high levels of NEETs and noticing Ofsted and retainment of good teachers, or teachers, in fact, in
exactly.
So that's what they're getting the figures from.
Of course, and the classic response to that is to engineer initiatives where you look at how do you get effective teachers from one setting into a more deprived, less advantaged setting. And so there's a big study done last year in the US, Michael Kraft and John Pape, who've done a lot of work over the years on school improvement and that sort of thing. And they looked at this portability study about how likely it is that you can take an effective teacher from one setting and they found that almost without exception, moving teachers into new settings with less advantaged cohorts made them less effective teachers.
Yeah. And but there's also the Matthew effect as well. I mean, if you don't have that many teachers who want to go and work in areas of high deprivation, as because of the day-to-day struggles of being a teacher in those settings. There are some people who do. There are also some people who are local to those communities, but I think there's also this correlation with people tend to teach in the place where they went to university and or teacher training. And so the bigger cities where these colleges of training and tend to be. So if you are in a Blackpool, in a Margate or wherever, it's very unlikely that you will have on your doorstep. So which says something about where training should be, and perhaps more in school training. But even then, where are the main people lie? I mean, the change in London over the years has been extraordinary. Because when I first started teaching in London, it was a very deprived education, a very deprived area. But then since then,
it's the real winner, isn't it?
Well, it's gentrified incredibly over that time, central London. The other big thing is young people with SEND are 80% more likely to be NEET. And having an EHCP during school is the strongest single link to becoming NEET at 17 to 19.
So what does that suggest?
And there are also overlaps are common. For example, children who are looked after. So children either in a children's home or fostering and various other things for at least 12 months were over 6 times more likely to have an EHCP than the overall pupil population.
And I think that's one of the things which has aerated some people. That there's a hint in Milburn's review that those students who are most at risk of becoming NEET need less academic education. They need more practical work-based preparation.
Right. And can we get back to this? We still have a school system that fails, and again, using that word advisedly, a good number of children.
40%, Martin.
Yeah, and doesn't offer alternatives.
Right. So is he right then? Do those 40% that the current GCSE is sort of spitting out the wrong end, do they need something else? So they need less academic education and more practical preparation.
Well,
Is that the answer?
is there something to be said for having, and this is the Kenneth Baker argument, that at the time when children take options, that they have an option there for a what he called or tried to set up, which did sort of start but sort of faltered on the way, city technical colleges that you can opt into at the age of 13, 14 to go to a more vocational based education. And would that be a sensible idea? The big problem is, of course, is that you come out of those places with good technical skills and there's no technical jobs to go to because of deindustrialization over the years. But if the country is reindustrializing, as it says it is, and not just employing robots in these places, perhaps there will be more practical vocational options and apprenticeships, etc., etc.
Yeah, we need Gemma Collins to sort this out, don't we?
Well, this is it. Yeah. There's also mental health, and this is a big issue that people who are perhaps skeptical about the rise in the number of autism diagnoses and things like that, which are a huge number of people on the ASD spectrum do not end up in employment or for their life. There's something like, and I'm plucking this figure out of thin air, but it's something like 70 to 80% of people on the autism spectrum do not have a lifetime full of employment.
And it depends what you mean by somewhere on the autism spectrum, because people with profound autism and who are non-verbal, that tracks.
Mm-hmm.
That would make sense. But if we mean people who are considered to be able to mask symptoms, is that what we mean? And that's very different.
Right, and again, for a lifetime, of course, if we're talking about young people now, we can only just talk about their life as to the age they are at. But things like because obviously COVID had an effect here, but things like persistent absenteeism, and which can be associated with ADHD, ASD, and various other things, and that is associated with a 3.9% higher risk, of being NEET.
But you would think that would apply equally across all of those other countries, like the Netherlands and Ireland, wouldn't you? Because they all have
well, not necessarily, because they might be either. It might be. Don't forget, when you're gathering figures, the different countries don't gather those figures.
Wow.
No, yeah. But or have different ways of doing so. I mean, I certainly think that there is a far fewer people described as ASD in Germany than there are here, for example. So I think there are things that perhaps those figures would be difficult to translate across. But certainly, if you're talking about schools having ways of trying to ensure people are on time and people attend, and that is a life skill, that is a 21st century skill, if you
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah,
is
yeah.
that is a social
Well,
skill.
it's
How do
sure
you
it's a
make
soft
sure?
skill. Yeah.
I mean, well, it's
Yeah.
it's it, is it a knowledge? I don't know. It's a
Well,
skill.
it's
Turning
I
up on
guess
time.
there's yeah, I guess it's important to know why turning on, the habit of turning up on time matters.
Yeah,
And if you believe it doesn't, then you can see how not having that habit would be pretty consequential when looking for work. It's one of those things where there is no, whatever else schools do, and the fact that schools teach an academic curriculum and prepare students to take qualifications and all of those things, we also create microcosms of the wider world, and we create conditions in which it's safe for children to fail, and so we introduce them. If we're doing things properly, we introduce them to the consequences of not attending, sort of not being punctual, and we play those out in ways which are less likely to penalise them over the long term than employers are going to. And so whilst it's important to be compassionate and to be understanding about the reasons that children have, the difficulties they have in attending and being punctual, it's not doing children any favours not to introduce them to what it's like to have the consequences of not doing those things later on in life, is it?
yeah, and it's perhaps how it's done as well. So
Go on.
perhaps, well, you're talking about punishment. I mean, you can go down the route, but
Punishments.
punishment straight off, bang, bang, bang,
Mm.
three strikes and you're out, etc., etc. You're in detention or whatever, or whatever it happens to be. Then you
Mm.
say, but you've got special needs, you've got ASD, okay, so you can have a
Yeah,
pass, okay, you can leave class when you need to, etc.,
yeah, yeah,
etc. When
yeah.
it's all getting too much, and
But employers
those
aren't going to
things.
do that, are they?
Well, some employers. Well, this is the thing. Some employers do, yeah, and some
Do
employers
they?
do offer those things now. And now that employers are becoming more and more aware of those issues with some of their workforce, but it doesn't mean that all employers would, and it doesn't mean it's the right thing to do if it's just, oh yeah, okay, just give them a pass, that's it, because it's not structuring an environment that allows those children to try and attend more and making it better for them. But I mean, there might be reasons why someone who's on the ASD spectrum doesn't want to come into school, and that might be bullying. It might be they don't want to talk about that because they find it difficult to communicate. So the school doesn't do anything else except, okay, they've got ASD, they can just come in when they want if they can, and tries to arrange with the parents something about that, but does not go actually underneath the reason for that ASD child not attending. And it should be the right of that child to attend, and to attend
Well, it
a safer place than the one that
yeah,
perhaps they feel they're having to put up with. And bullying rates, as we know, is higher for ASD pupils.
right, yeah. So yeah, okay, fine, and you would also say that employers have an equal responsibility to root out bullying culture in the workplace as well, and that's all fine and dandy. But uh, with those important caveats, it's still really, really important, isn't? I think
Mhm.
that schools continue that process, that job of replicating in safe and humane ways what it's like to not follow the expectations that are going to be needed to be adhered to much, much more firmly in
Yeah.
adult life.
Well, and and I think that a lot of schools do this quite well, but it's
Yeah,
something that you have to structure for certain kids more. But the fact is, it should be an aim to get all kids attending and on time, no matter what. And that
I
means
think
that you
it.
have to differentiate in some ways about how to achieve that, not differentiate the non-achievement of it. If you see what I mean.
Yeah. So is that about making what happens in lessons more relevant then?
Well, this is when perhaps this should be our last sort of look at, and that is the curriculum. Is the
Mm.
curriculum something the so-called, and I'm going to mention it again, the knowledge-rich curriculum, is it something that is not actually helping kids in the world of work?
Right.
Now,
So depending, and I guess competing definitions exist, but is it possible to have a knowledge-rich curriculum that does build better bridges from entitlement to adult participation?
yeah, and it depends what you mean by knowledge as well, doesn't it? I mean,
Yeah, of course,
knowledge
exactly.
rich,
Of
how
course it
to,
does.
but should there be, in other words, if you are a school that is just utterly limited in its focus, and that is GCSEs, A levels, university, bang, that is your focus. And some schools are like that. Some schools are like that.
Well,
That's their
why are they
main
like that,
focus.
Martin?
Their main focus.
Why do they do that? Is they're not. I mean, for the most part, I don't think the school leaders are making those choices because they necessarily agree that that's always the right thing to do for every student. They're doing that because that's how they're judged.
They're judged, yeah. That's their
And
attainment
so,
judgment, and it's also the one. And even though the tables have been taken out of the way, they still maintained by certain newspapers managed to put schools into tables anyway. By taking the data and unsurprisingly being able to put it in a different order than alphabetical.
absolutely.
So
So I think that if we want, and I think that there are going to be few people who would disagree that better technical options, better careers advice, better work experience are all good things. But unless we make those things against which schools are supported and held to account, then and that those are prioritised as what's important in going on, then schools are not going to be incentivized necessarily to do those things, or there are going to be disincentives for them to focus on those things. And that's something that we need to acknowledge.
well, they've done a review of teachers, the Pearson School Report in 2025.
Right.
Ask teachers what do they think about
Okay.
how their schools are preparing kids for future careers and things like that. 8% say their school prepares children for future careers. 42% called for more vocational options. Digital skills and creative skills over 30% in both cases. 3/4 of teachers found that the curriculum put too much emphasis on passing exams and not enough focus on preparing young people for employment.
Right.
73% said they didn't teach soft skills for employment.
Yeah. I mean, I guess one of the difficulties with that is how do you get rid of some maths lessons and have soft skills for employment lessons? I mean, what does that look like?
Well, this is where we got into the whole thing with personal learning and thinking skills, PLUTs as it was, and things like that, to try and put it into an academic curriculum. I mean, the other thing
which was a nonsense.
Which was a nonsense. But the other thing this report looks at, and remember, it's not at this stage saying this is what we need to do. It's just saying this is what is out there. There have been repeated attempts to broaden the curriculum and open up vocational pathways. Since 2010, effort has focused on offering better quality vocational options, including technical awards, reforms to BTECs, the introduction and growth of university technical colleges, aiming to embed more technical education. We talked about this earlier. But these routes remain marginal rather than mainstream. In other words, there's all these things being done, but they're not a universal offer.
Oh. They're not a universal offer, and as always, they're sort of more attractive for other people's children than one's own, is one of the
and
that
is right at the I mean, perhaps it's class, perhaps it's other things in this country, but generally, if you are a horned son of toil or something like that. There are
A son of the
the
soil.
the son of the soil. These are the plowshares for you. And
Yeah.
you go off to university, my bright young thing, and when you've managed to change it that the majority of kids should go
Yeah.
to
And
university
successful,
and taken away the
successful.
industrial base, then you don't expect much.
Yeah. Yeah. A successful student becomes a doctor, not a plumber.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
if that's how you're always going to measure success, then you will always have failure, because not everyone wants to be, can be, or should be a doctor.
No. No. So there's various things I think we need to. So, the report does a great job of painting the picture and showing the extent to which this is a problem. We can't hide from that. We absolutely have to make changes. But there are some things I think we should resist. We should resist the idea that get rid of exams. I think GCSEs, as we've just said and have said many times before, are poorly designed in lots and lots of ways, and there's serious reform needed. But not having exams, just having vague portfolios and teacher judgments is probably not going to be any better. I think we should resist the idea of generic employability leaking into the curriculum. It needs to be done in ways which are meaningful and well thought out and shouldn't replace subjects. We shouldn't end up in a situation, and I think it's so dangerous, Martin. We shouldn't end up with a situation where there's like a poor curriculum for poor children, and that's always the tendency.
And can we, but also talk about what a poor curriculum might look like, because a poor curriculum is perhaps there for all children at the moment, in terms of not offering the workplace transitionary skills and or information and or opportunities. And that might be a big thing, because there's always the children of perhaps the middle class can perhaps find themselves in their friends, their fathers or mothers or whoever, someone in the family's friends or someone else's business or something like that. There's ways of getting onto the
These
ladder somehow.
informal middle class routes are all
Yeah.
very well for them as does, but there needs to be something more formal and more structured for people without those advantages. Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, look, I mean, I think we all agree that schools should be preparing students for work. But what I think is less obvious is that what schools should be doing is shrinking an academic education to fit inside an employer's wish list.
Yeah, it's a difficult thing to get right, but one thing that we can say is this
If
country,
it was easy, we'd have done it.
this country hasn't managed it. Perhaps we all need to go to find out what the Irish have done over the last few
And
years.
the Netherlands,
And
absolutely.
the Netherlands, indeed.
Yeah.
And on that note, see you next time.
Yeah, waste some more time with us next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.